Talking Harsin, talking Bo, talking Auburn Tigers here at the Voice of College Football. We bring in Michael Gittens. We also have Ike Jones from the War Rapport right here on YouTube. So just go to your search bar and put in the War Rapport, and you will catch them talking Auburn football all the time. Gentlemen, we appreciate you coming on. How you doing tonight?
Amazing. Thanks for having us.
Great. Yes, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to have both of you. You guys have an excellent YouTube channel. And again, we would encourage everybody to head on over there for Auburn Talk all the time. And how can we talk Auburn football? I don't think it goes on. You guys probably get questions every day about Bo Nix. He's got an army in his camp, but he's also got many detractors. And there's reasons why. Is it the coaching? Is it him? What is it? How well has he played? How much do we blame the offensive line? The guy's a tremendously talented athlete, and pretty much the microcosm of his career was pretty much out of the gate against Oregon. He didn't look so good for 3.5 quarters. Then he pulls the game out in the last few seconds, and it was pretty sporadic. It didn't look good on the box score, but he got it done at the end. So, Michael, we'll start with you in regards to your thoughts about Bo Nix and what's been good and not so good, and will he be the guy this fall again?
Well, Bo is extremely talented. His talent ceiling is high. I think, we've heard Harsin in recent days acknowledge that his talent ceiling is really high, but his numbers and his output have been underwhelming these first 2 years. So, you have a camp that says that it's coaching, and then you have a camp that says that it is the young man himself. Now, I believe it's a mixture of both, right? Like, I think that he has not been super accurate his entire football career, mostly due to fundamentals. And, we interview players. We talked to Chris Todd, former Auburn quarterback, and, he, in analyzing Bo, said if you can fix his fundamentals, you'll fix 90% of his accuracy issues. So what I think about Bo is that when we listen to Harsin, it seems that they're hyper aware of what Bo needs to work on to take that next step, right? And for what it's worth, I don't think that he was getting that hard coaching before. When you talk to former players, they tell us the only way to get it right is to go out there and rep it until you can't get it wrong. And, in this new kind of military style coaching that Harsin is bringing to the Plains, we're hearing from the players that, there's a lot more discipline around what they're doing. And they're certainly going to have to be more disciplined at the quarterback position if we're going to see some different results this fall.
What you got on this one, Ike?
Just as far as Bo Nix is concerned, he covered a lot of it. Super talented, right? Like, I don't think the talent is in question. He does some amazing things athletically that most quarterbacks would not be able to do, whether it is making a play with his feet or even, his arm talent. I think the issue with him is consistency, right? And you talk about a microcosm. I think he mirrored the previous coaching staff, right? Like, it was inconsistent at best. There were some really high highs and then there were some really low lows. And as a fan, it frustrates you because you understand the capabilities because you see those heights. And then when you come crashing back down to those lows, you're just like, man, why can't we level out somewhere here and figure out a way to be consistently doing the excellency that we're accustomed to seeing from either the coaching staff or the players. And like I said, Bo Nix, I think he encapsulates that entire feeling that we've been getting from the program for the last couple of years.
Guys, when we're talking about the stature of the program, like in Auburn, most of the time the quarterback wins the job because he's the guy and because he went out and grabbed it and won the job. He's just that good. But there are times when there's just nobody else that's going to take the job, and maybe that he's not necessarily lighting the world on fire, but he's the best option that you have. So what are the other options, and can we see a possible quarterback battle run deep into August?
I don't think at this point that there's much of a competition going on. I think that it's Bo's job to lose. He's going to have to perform really poorly, this week in practice and at A-Day to not at least start the season. I think the better question is, how long is his leash going to be once the season starts? If he has not shown significant improvement, particularly on the road. Now, we have a really tough road test at Penn State, and what if there are full stadiums will be a raucous environment. And Bo on the road has not been a great thing for the Auburn Tigers the last 2 years. His numbers have been pretty abysmal on the road, so he's going to have to show a lot of improvement. Harsin talked about, knowing when to throw the ball away, right? Knowing when, if you extend the play, that you don't have to make every play. Sometimes the best play is to make no play. And, he's supremely confident in his own abilities, but you cannot out-athlete everybody at this level like you did in high school. He hasn't seemed to learn that through his first 2 years at Auburn. And I think that Harsin and Bobo are really going to settle him in, or try to, right? So that, we can keep the team in the best position to win, because we have, an all SEC back in tank. Right. You have what should be an improved offensive line. I thought they got a bad rap last season, taking a lot of heat for, bad play calling and bad play designs that required them to block more than 3 seconds on average for plays to develop. So better play calling is going to help Bo. It's going to help the offensive line, and it's certainly going to help the Auburn offense.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as other options, though, I do think that we have talent in the quarterback room. It's mostly unproven, right? So you're going to have to go with Bo Nix for what he's a known commodity.
Right.
But the freshman that's coming in, Demetrius Davis, everybody is really excited about the potential for him. We had Loy, who was the transfer over here, came in last year in backup duty, is currently in backup duty. He was hurt early in spring, so he has been limited right now in the spring. I'm a particular fan of Shea Garnett. I think that he's a really talented kid. He was basically redshirted last year, so he still has a ton of eligibility left in front of him. He's a bigger guy, athletic, really smooth with his throwing motion. He has yet to see the field for Auburn. There's a walk-on kid. What's his name? I can't remember what his name is right now. The walk on that we have that's been lighting it up a little bit in practice, but there's some prospects for some other people out there. But back to your question initially, is like it's Bo or who else, right? Like, we don't really know what the other options are, just mostly not because they're not talented, but really because we haven't seen them. They're just unproven. And it's really just potential that you have out there until they're actually able to get into SEC competition specifically and see what they're able to do against people that aren't high school kids or,
right.
whatever, throwing it around in practice. So yet to be seen, but I definitely have some hope for some of those other guys.
It doesn't matter now, but I would think that Auburn fans might have an eye toward Lexington, Kentucky a little bit more than they would normally, just because Joey Gatewood apparently wasn't better than Bo Nix, but he probably is going to be the starting quarterback at Kentucky.
Yeah. Going to be very interesting to see what Gatewood does in the starting role in there. In retrospect, there were a lot of people who were calling for Gatewood early in his career at Auburn. I do think ultimately the right decision was made, Bo Nix versus Joey Gatewood, just from a standpoint of him Bo Nix giving you more opportunity to throw the ball. From an athleticism standpoint and what fit the system that Gus Malzahn wanted to run, though, I don't see any reason why Gatewood wouldn't allow you to win games, though. And sometimes I think got enamored with, again, the talent potential of Bo Nix and not necessarily his talent output. And we didn't get an opportunity to see what the output could possibly be for Gatewood. So that is a little disappointing that we wasted a talent like that, but we'll see what he does in Kentucky. We don't really even know what they're going to be doing in Kentucky offensively right now, though. So is the system even going to be something that he can fit into? Yet to be seen if they're going to pull something together that's going to fit Joey Gatewood.
Yeah, I will add that talent evaluation is going to be very different than it was under the previous coaching staff, right? So the way they're evaluating who the best guy is, and you talk about who's the number two, and to Ike's point, we don't know who the number two is because development at that position has been so poor that, if the starter goes down, the season goes down. That's where we've been at the last 8 years. Right. We thought that Jeremy Johnson would be the heir apparent to Nick Marshall. It turned out he wasn't. We had a stint with Sean White. Jarrett Stidham came in, very heralded, underwhelmed in his second year, right, in this system. And we have not seen an example of this staff taking a freshman quarterback and developing him into an SEC caliber quarterback. So,
we haven't seen him develop anybody, honestly.
Anybody, yeah. So it's going to be something to watch here with Harsin and Bobo, whether they can help us make some, progress in that area.
Folks, we got a free Auburn face mask for you at voiceofcollegefootball.com. So register for free right there. You can get a free Auburn mask, or we've got 35 teams available, again, at voiceofcollegefootball.com. If you don't want a mask, then just check us out at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Register for free. We launched that site a couple months ago, and check it out. We've got new content there every day, and we're going to be doing great things throughout the summer. You guys are doing a nice job of putting these things into context, because you got to watch the games. You can't just look at a stat sheet and say this is what it is. But of course, the stats generally tell the story. I'm going to say they tell, depending on the situation, 75% of the story. And with Bo Nix, it's 58% passing. It's 12 touchdowns, 7 picks last year. And what we see out of that type of program elsewhere, we're seeing guys throw for 35 and 40 touchdowns. Now, that may not necessarily be Bo Nix's lot in life, even if he's successful, but are we going to be able to see a reflection on the stat sheet? What would you guys like to see that's reasonable out of him if he's playing well, if he gets developed? They're running an offense that's not Joe Brady and Joe Burrow 2 years ago, but what you would expect to be a nice improvement this year.
For me, it really, I go back and nostalgically and think about how great our defense was 2 years ago, and long for the days of having a very dominant defense with an adequately performing quarterback. We lament over the fact that if Bo Nix his freshman year could have just been an average quarterback, as far as his consistency is concerned, specifically on the road, I think that we win a lot more games that season. So for me, I just want to see Bo Nix get into the mid 60s as far as his completion percentage is concerned, just be a solid manager of the football game, hand the ball off successfully to a Heisman caliber, in my opinion, running back, and get the ball out to the talented guys that we have on the outside. We've got a lot of wide receivers, unproven again, but very talented guys that he can get the ball into their hands and let them do work. And then just take care of the football. The touchdown to interception ratio is really what I'm more concerned about, not necessarily how many touchdowns he throws for, because I honestly expect that he's going to use his legs to get a lot of things done offensively. So if he can keep his ratio pretty lopsided in the direction of touchdowns, and he can get that completion percentage up to the mid 60s, I'd be very satisfied. Again, if we do have that dominant defense coming back where we can limit people's ability to score against us, and then we just play ball control, keep away, let's keep it moving, I'd be happy with that. Yeah,
for me, it's the same, right? Like mid 60s, and the model for that would be 2020 Kellen Mond, right? Mm-hmm. What Jimbo Fisher was able to do with Kellen Mond at Texas A&M is exactly what I would be looking for. I think that's a reasonable progression for Bo. The better quarterbacks in our league we've seen over the last 3 years have completion percentages somewhere above 70%. Right. Mac Jones was crazy accurate, not just in completing passes, but his ball placement was phenomenal. Kyle Trask was one of the most blitzed quarterbacks in our league, and Florida had a one-dimensional offense. But when you blitzed him, he burned you to the tune of 17 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions. So blitzing him was a non-starter. Right. What we experienced last year with Bo was, when kept clean, he completed only 64% of his passes. Now, quarterbacks in our league, when under pressure, their percentage drops off significantly. So, a nearly 80% Mac Jones, right, when kept clean, was only 55% when under pressure. So the question is, what is that fall off from? He's just got to be more accurate with the football. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Again, I can't reiterate, the offensive line took a lot of heat last year. When they gave him a perfect pocket, he still could not complete passes. And even when he did, sometimes the ball placement was so poor that the receivers were not able to make a play after the catch, or it kept them from making the maximum play after the catch. They just have to get better with that. Now, some of that was on Bo, and some of it was on poor, slow developing plays that were called that didn't give him any options to check down to. All of that has to improve for Bo Nix to improve his completion percentage. So I think mid 60s is reasonable. We don't need to, with the defense that we have and the running back that we have, we don't need him to go out there and throw for 70 3% or anything crazy like that. You just limit the turnovers, manage the game, and don't miss the big throws when you get the chance. That's all we need.
Folks, we ask that you like the videos, share the videos on social media, because if you enjoy the content and you're taking it in, then others will as well. So please share the videos out there on social media and subscribe right here. Head on over to the War Rapport, and we'll have the banner up here again in just a second. The War Rapport, check out their Auburn coverage with Michael Gittins and also Ike Jones. All right. The quarterback gets too much credit, too much blame, and too much talk from college football fans. There's no doubt about that. So we don't want to fall prey to that. But everything you guys stated was well worth the time, no doubt about that. Really good stuff on Bo Nix. But there's 21 other guys on the field. And I, for one, trumpet the offensive line because I don't think those guys get enough talk at all. But, we're looking at the spring game this Saturday. So by the time we reach that, we know that there will have been 15 sessions. It's tough to get information out. You got to kind of latch on to as much as you can and gather what you can from what the coaches and players are telling us, and also the video that leaks out and is presented. But what are the standout storylines, changes that have been made, whether good or bad, Ike, that stands out to you over the last month?
So I think for me, it's going to be the performance of the offensive line and how well they're going to be able to gel. I don't know that we found a solid five up front for the offensive line yet. So I really want to see how they are going to look. And it's really just going to be a story of the trenches. So, we've got a defensive line that's mostly unproven as well. Tyrone Truesdale is really the only returning guy from that line. We've got a lot of guys, had some guys that redshirted that are coming back. Wright went down early with an injury on the defensive line. We've just converted JJ Pegues from a tight end / a halfback, fullback to a defensive lineman. So how he's going to perform likely is going to be a hotly contested thing that we'll be looking forward to. So the trenches are going to be super important in this game. I think the linebacker core and the defensive backs are all very knowledgeable and experienced groups. I expect them to perform well. I don't anticipate a lot of spotlight being shown on them. Tank Bigsby is, again, in my opinion, a Heisman caliber running back. So I don't think anybody's going to be super worried about him. Now, when we fall back to who's the backup running back and who's getting those types of snaps and what those guys look like, you got Sean Shivers coming back. We'll look to see how he functions in a more downhill rushing attack. But I think the big storylines are going to be the trenches. How's the offensive line performing? How's the defensive line gelling and performing in this new look defense under Derek Mason is going to be important.
Yeah, for me, big storyline, Auburn switching to a 3-4 defense under Derek Mason, right? And then you take a guy like Pegues, our 300-pound athletic tight end, and you move him to D-line. And he should be something that's going to be hard for defenses, for offenses to handle if he can learn the technique, right? So on the offensive side of the ball, other than at quarterback, I really think that a big storyline is going to be you lose 3 top 10 all-time receivers, on the edges, right? And what are they going to do there? We have had talent at wide receiver over the years. So Javarius Johnson has really emerged as a standout this spring. My sleeper for the spring was Malcolm Johnson Jr. He's good. He is poised to be the speed guy to replace somebody like Anthony Schwartz. And then you have Capers and Canyon as well. There's a wealth of talent in that wide receiver room. And can we get the ball to these guys, right? And what do we see during the spring? Are the receivers just essentially running all go routes like we saw a lot of last year? Or do we see something different where, they are running, intermediate routes and the quarterback has some options, right, to get those guys the ball? I'm really going to be watching the passing game because, when you have a back like Tank, one thing that will help him is being able to keep the pressure out of the trenches by completing passes regularly and not just when we're behind the chains. So, we passed a lot on obvious passing downs over the last 2 years. And can we get the ball moving the right direction to give us third and manageable rather than third and long as often as we were in that position last year. So receivers going to play a big part in that. I think people are ready. It's going to be a big thing for recruiting too. Big time receivers have stayed away from Auburn because there's no guarantee you're going to get the ball if you come here. Right. And they've got to show that they can get the ball to playmakers. So I'll be watching that this A-Day.
I watch Auburn play 7 or 8 times a year. I watch all the big games, most of the games in the SEC and the big non-conference game. Of course, I'll lock in on Penn State. So I watch, a program again like Auburn play 7 or 8 times a year. I get fed to me that the offensive line's been pretty bad. Some people tell me I've got a photographic memory, but I'm not remembering what the Auburn offensive line did by the games that I watched against Alabama, Texas A&M on down the line. But I will say, and you guys are giving me a different narrative, which is great to hear, that the play calling could have been better and the quarterback could have made better decisions to get the ball out of his hand on time and not be running around from sideline to sideline. That would make the offensive line look a little bit better. But I will say this, what for me would be a little concerning as an Auburn fan looking at the offensive line situation is that I think we can agree it wasn't dominant. No. And that you bring in 2 players in the 2021 class. One of them is the 34th rated guard and the other is the 50th rated tackle. So you didn't really fortify it with like top level guys in the offensive front.
Right. Yeah, no, we haven't talked a ton about offensive line. Definitely a point of concern, specifically at the tackle position. We've been doing a lot of, over the last few years, we've gotten a lot of guards in, but we haven't gotten a lot of tackles. And so when you're talking about the speed rushers on the edge that you're going to see consistently in these top level programs, you're going to need someone who can handle that sort of thing. That has been an issue for us. And we don't really have a true center. Like the center that we currently have is playing out of position. He's really a guard that's playing center. So the offensive line by no means is solidified. They're average, right? They're not, dominant, mauling. He brought the Texas A&M example of, how Jimbo Fisher was able to utilize that run game and short passing game to really help Kellen Mond. A lot of that was anchored by a really great offensive line at Texas A&M. Auburn has not had that over the last couple of years. Much better in run blocking scenarios than pass blocking, but hopefully we can continue to prove with a little more experience. Last year, a ton of inexperience. I think we started maybe 3 games. I can go back and check that, where it was the same offensive line unit for the entirety of those 3 games. There just was not a lot of consistency. And again, you're going to hear me talk about consistency. Wasn't a ton of consistency when it comes to the offensive line of who was lining up snap to snap, be it injuries or poor performance. That was just, it is what it is. A lot of it was injuries. So hopefully we can get some more consistency up there and guys can start to gel into some spaces. Definitely we'll be looking forward to seeing how that performs during the A-Day game.
Yeah, listen, we under-recruited offensive line these last few years. I mean, not a single freshman offensive lineman signed over the last few years. And, I'm not so much concerned about where the guys we got are rated, more so than I'm concerned about how we develop who we have. It's not all about stars, right? I think that you get a guy, they're going to repurpose some guys. That's something we haven't seen a ton over the last few years. That was a staple in early Auburn teams in the early 2000s, where they would take a guy like Ben Grubbs, who played defense in high school. And, the coaches say, you're going to make a lot of money at the next level if you move to offensive line. And he played 9 years in the NFL as a tackle, made a lot of money doing that, right? So recruiting hasn't really been a problem. So I think they have talent, but offensive line has left a lot to be desired. So while I do think they took a lot of unnecessary heat in 2020, they weren't great. They didn't play great, and there's equal blame to go around there, right? Like, there is the coaching. Certainly, we made a coaching change. I know we'll talk about that, but play calling just didn't help them in pass pro, right? These plays were slow developing. We went back and we watched the film, and it just didn't. The better quarterbacks in our league had the ball out of their hands in under 2.5 seconds. So their lines didn't have to block much longer than that. Bo Nix had the ball out of his hands in 2.87 seconds, 87 seconds on average, right? So it's not as if there was no time to find somebody. It's just that there was nobody to throw to. So it was either poorly run routes or poorly designed plays. And they've got to change. Harsin and Bobo job number one is that they're going to have to scheme around our deficiencies better than we have before. If offensive line is one of them, it's going to require us to get the ball out of the QB's hands and design some plays that help take the pressure off these guys so that defenses can not just pin their ears back and come out and bum rush them to stop this offense. We saw Florida do it with Trask last year. Their offensive line wasn't great, and they had no running game. And he was Heisman level good. So you just have to scheme better. So that's what I'm hoping that they'll do for this offensive line.
When you shop Amazon, we ask that you use the link in the description section below to help us build the channel. We've been talking, you mentioned, yeah, that's right. You got a new coach. We've been talking for 25 minutes. We haven't even mentioned that.
Yeah.
So here's the easy take on Brian Harsin is that it's a reliable hire. It should be at least that at the minimum. He didn't build Boise State into what it is. Other guys did that, like Dan Hawkins and Dirk Cutter, and of course, Chris Peterson most recently, but he maintained the excellence. And sure, UCF's jumped up in Houston and Cincinnati and Memphis, but man, Boise State, they have been the gold standard at the group of five level for 2 decades, winning 11, 12 games every year. And Brian Harsin did the same, basically there, going like, I forget the exact numbers, but winning 75, 80% of his games. Okay, so he comes in to the SEC. He's not real familiar with the territory. He gets the job. Other people were looking to Coastal Carolina and Louisiana, Billy Napier and Jamie Chadwell, places like that to bring in a coach. And obviously there's always the small percentage of the fan base that has just illusions of grandeur, grabbing NFL coaches or Urban Meyer or whomever. But as it stands, Ike, we'll start with you in regards to when Brian Harsin was hired, your thoughts about the hiring, where you stood on that, and what you've seen out of him since then that may have changed your thought process a little bit.
Yeah, I approach it with cautious optimism all the time. You know, the fan in me won't let me bash it too much until I've seen something. He definitely isn't he's been a good coach where he's been, but of course, you know, coaching at Boise State is not necessarily coaching in the SEC. So that doesn't mean that it translates. So until I learned more, I was just like, okay, before I react, let me see what the guy actually has out here, right? As you know, we've seen over time, I've loved everything that I've seen. He's saying all the right things and he's doing all of the right things, in my opinion. Either that or they're doing an excellent job of selling me hope. And I really don't like being sold hope, but you know, I'll take it for right now until you snatch it away from me. But they're doing a good job of putting out all the right speeches. Like everything that they're saying in press conferences are things that I want to hear my coach say. The things that they're doing on social media and, you know, him getting up early in the morning, working out with the team, him actually leading team drills at the practice are things that I would like to see my coach do. And him talking about the way that he doesn't just want to develop football players. He wants to develop men that are going to go on and lead successful lives, in addition to him wanting to be able to develop coaches that are going to be able to coach really well. Those are all the things that you want to hear about the guy that's going to build your program. So nothing that he's done or said has made me tip back in the other direction. If anything, I've become more optimistic about the prospects of who we have as our head coach going into the future.
My initial reaction was who? Right? Like, I mean, to your point, Mark, he wasn't really at the top of anybody's list. It seemed like a hire kind of out of nowhere. So after the hire is made, you start to look at his track record and particularly his track record with developing players. And I started to get a little bit more encouraged the more that I heard from him. He said all the right things in his introductory press conference. I was very, very intrigued to hear him talk about strength and conditioning and nutrition as pillars and a foundation for a solid program. It's something that really gets overlooked. Coach Kevin Yoxel was our strength and conditioning coach, for 13 years. So he was the strength and conditioning coach for 2 undefeated teams at Auburn in 2004 and 2010, with Cam Newton. And, I think that was something that left a lot to be desired, that Harsin is going to bring back to the program. He's going to bring back, what I hear from him is he's going to bring back a certain kind of toughness that we've been missing mentally. I think a mark of a good leader is that he surrounds himself with other good leaders. And he comes out of the gate and he makes what I think is the most underrated coordinator hire of the offseason in Derek Mason. You bring in a proven SEC guy who, did really good things with Vanderbilt's defense, as head coach there, right? Before he left the SEC. And now he's back. He knows this league. He can recruit the South. I think that Harsin has surrounded himself with a great staff, right? Wide receiver coach Cornelius Williams, he's betting on this young guy to be able to come in and work some things that we've been underwhelming there. So he seems to have a plan and a blueprint, for success. And, I get asked a lot, Mark, like, what is a successful season for Auburn, in Brian Harsin's first year? I think 8 wins is a really good season. I really do. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear that. We have something that we say at the War Report, no sunshine pumping. So if you're looking for a reason that Auburn's going to go undefeated and win the national championship, you won't hear it here. But I think that he does have the opportunity to surprise a lot of people with the talent that he has, because Auburn has generally done well when nobody expects anything of Auburn, right? I mean, we had 2 undefeated seasons when we came in not very highly rated to entering the season. So, the one thing that I think is great for Harsin is similar to 2013 when Gus came in, right? He is not taking over a talentless team. This is not a rebuild. He just needs to, fix the mentality of the team first. He's going to do some things differently. So that starts in the weight room. Owen Pappo was quoted as saying that they're going to look like Marines come fall. They've really energized this team with the strength and conditioning program. I think that Brian Harsin was the right choice. Alan Green, really bucked the system on this one, right? We have an AD who went out and said, I'm going to go out and get my guy. Not who boosters want, not who fans want, but the right guy. And, I think that the players seem to have bought in, which is one of the most important things. And we'll see what the result of that is come fall. But I really like the energy that he's putting out right now and the excitement that he's creating around the program.
And to your point, Michael, the comment that you made in response to me citing the lower rated offensive lineman brought in the 2021 class was, let's develop. Let's do what they do at Wisconsin. They don't bring in 5-star offensive linemen very often, and they make them NFL players. Brian Harsin is in this long line of Boise State coaches that I think people out there would be surprised how many Boise State players are in the NFL.
Yes, right.
And Boise State is never even in the top 70 in college football in the recruiting rankings. Yeah. Like they don't bring in any 4 stars. Most of their guys on the field are 2 stars, and they're competing with Power 5 teams. So they obviously know how to develop there. It's a different deal. It's the SEC, but it's still football, and it's still high-level football. So that'll be interesting to see what goes on there. I'm going to hit you guys with a kind of a program question. I don't even know exactly where I'm headed with this, because there are a few programs around college football that fascinate me. UCLA for certain reasons, because I figure, why can't you win? You're in a beautiful place. People want to go there. Why can't you win? There are certain. Auburn's one of them too, because I think you've got a very unique history in college football. So people ask me all the time, where's Auburn? Where would you rank them? What tier are they on? And I always say they're a top 15 program. It's a top 15 program in the country. I don't care what their record was last year. But if you look at, let's just take the last 20 years. I made the comment to somebody the other day that I said between Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, Auburn was better than Alabama. Not by a ton, but they were better. They won the series. They finished in the top 10 more. They were just better. Through Bo, through Pat Dye, into the early 2000s, obviously Tuberville won 6 straight against the Tide. They were just better for a long time, for 30 years. So I don't completely buy into this narrative that some people have, that since Nick Saban's at Tuscaloosa, you just kind of give up. You throw your hands up and you say, we can't, let's take our 8-4 and that's it. Now, obviously, Michael, you're speaking to this particular season. You got to be reasonable, right? Of course, but you got a very interesting history and program, because you mentioned 2004. If I'm Auburn, I put a banner up in the stadium, because how in the world do you win an SEC championship, go undefeated, and the only reason you finish number 3 is because you hit the ceiling? Oklahoma and USC were at the top of the poll to start the season. So the way things worked back then is you climbed as far as you could, and then and because Auburn started like 19th that year, they couldn't climb high enough. Oh, that's stupid. And then in 2010, Cam takes him to a championship. You mentioned that 2013, that deal was unlike anything in the history of college football, going from 0-8 in the SEC to within 7 seconds of a national championship. That's unheard of. There's not a example like that in college football. And then over the past 7 or 8 years, except for that November run in beating Georgia and Alabama when they were both number one to get yourself within a 60 minutes of a college football playoff appearance, it's been 4 to 5 losses every year. So this program is it's intriguing to me in terms of what should be expected. When the highs come, they peak out high 2004, 10, 12, or 13. And the rest of the time, it seems like this disappointment of, we got this top 10 team on paper, but we just went 8-4. Right. We didn't quite get it done. So, again, many people consider this the toughest job in college football because of who's in the division and who's in the state. So, Michael, what do you think about all that? I don't even know what that question is. I just rambled on about what I think about Auburn.
I got what you're putting down, Mark. Let me sum it up for you simply. Top 10 recruiting classes on average should produce top 10 finishes at the end of the season. Period. Full stop. Right? That's not what we've been doing. We've been recruiting like a top 10 team, or like a top 15 program, but we regularly finish outside that number at the end of the season. And that's about development and coaching. Now, they caught lightning in a bottle when they hired that guy up the road at that other school, but to your point, we had made a really nasty habit out of beating them until he got there. And then he started what he termed the process. And that's what we hope Harsin is bringing. Listen, you don't have to, nobody's getting fired for not beating Nick Saban, because then everybody would be fired. And as a matter of fact, over the last 8 years, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Gus did it more than anybody. So it's not about just beating them. It's about showing a sustained pattern of development, with the guys that you have. And we haven't had trouble getting the talent. But what you do with them after what you get them is the mark of a good program or a great program. Right. And Auburn has the talent to be a great program. Now we need the leaders of men to come in and take that talent and turn us into the top 15, top 10 program that we've been recruiting like over the last 10 years. That sums it up for me. I mean, it's frustrating as fans, to know what they're capable of. Right. And then see it fall by the wayside, through totally controllable things. Nobody expects an undefeated season every year, and the fans of that other school, they think our year is all about beating them, Mark. It's not, right? It's really just about going out and being competitive every Saturday and feeling like the hundreds of hours that get put in between, January and August amount to a great product for what ultimately is about 42 hours of football in the fall. So I think that, Auburn is definitely, we're fun to watch when we're in it, and we're frustrating to watch when we're not. And mainly because
we're frustrating either way. Let's just be clear about that.
Yeah. I mean, even in the wins, we don't win easy. Right. In that you think about those undefeated seasons, 2010, and then it wasn't undefeated, but in 2013, we had a national championship team that gave up more points defensively than any other national champion in the history of college football. I needed heart attack medicine to watch that season, and they just barely pull it out at the end. Right. We had college football's best player, but he was surrounded with a lot of what I'll just say was average talent, guys who were good. But, how many of those guys went on beside Nick Fairley to play at the next level? So, that's about development and coaching. That's something that they have to get back if they want to be a true top 15 program in college football.
Yeah. You said it all. The frustration of the Auburn fan is seeing a team that you feel can be better than what they're showing on Saturday, and not knowing really where to find your bearings about what's the problem here. Like, why are we not doing better? You know, you have a national championship coach who comes in. We have a coach that takes us to a national title, I should say, and then the very next season it falls apart. And then, you know, you have the offensive coordinator who comes in and he's the coach, and you go back to a national championship, and then you're floating in the wind again until 2017, where it seems like you're rekindling the flame of, you know, winning ways, and then it goes back downhill. It's just this roller coaster ride. And it's frustrating for me, particularly as a fan, and I know a lot of other fans, when you couple the success that you have in the offseason with recruiting with the amount of money that you're paying a coach. You're paying him like a top 5, top 10 coach consistently, but then the product on the field doesn't marry either of those things. You're recruiting well, you're paying the staff well, so you can't say you're not paying for, you know, a quality coach. You can't say you're not getting quality recruits in, but then at the end of the season, you know, you look at the bowl record over the last couple of years, it's abysmal. Like, we're losing to everybody. And that's just not acceptable for a team with that much talent that's paying that much for their coach. Yeah, again, the word for me is consistency. I want to see some more consistency in the program, and hopefully Brian Harsin brings that back to us.
You needed some of those points you put on poor Purdue against. You needed those spread out against.
Yeah, spread out over a couple of bowl games would be great. We scored 63.
Yeah, for sure.
Unnecessarily. We didn't even need that much.
We didn't even need it. Yeah.
56 in the first half.
Yeah.
All right. Penn State's at number 10 on this FPI produced by ESPN. So that's not going to be an easy trip to Happy Valley, but you're at number 16. Do you have any thoughts about that, Michael? Does that sway you either way? Because as we discussed before we started to record, number 16 in the country also translates with that schedule to only about 7-5 if ESPN knows what they're talking about.
Right. Listen, the SEC West might as well be an extension of any division in the NFL, right? Like, I mean, it's going to be tough this year. A lot of people were down on LSU. I don't think they're going to be as bad as they played last year. You have Texas A&M, which is kind of on the rise. They have some things to replace on offense there. You know, Alabama is Alabama. Ole Miss looks resurgent on offense under Lane Kiffin. You know, who knows what Mike Leach is going to put out at Mississippi State. I mean, you've got a lot of competition that's going to happen in our league next year. And a lot of it just hinges on what I think is going to be how productive are we going to be on offense. And our defense, you know, Ike referenced 2019. We played well enough. We had a championship level defense in 2019, but they got no help from the offense that year, particularly on the road. So the 16 FPI, I think, reflects the respect that they have for the talent that we have. And I mean, it may even be a little high to me, but I just really think, you know, at the end of the day, they're looking at Auburn and saying this team is supremely talented. You know, we got the transfer on defense from West Virginia, Drayshawn Miller. He's going to come in and help anchor what is already a dynamic secondary. Defensively, I expect us to be good. I think that Derek Mason is going to know how to get the most out of this defense, and they're going to give us a chance to win most games. So the question will be, can we just produce enough offense to win those games? Because you're not going to stop everybody. Offense is, you know, the rules of football have become so offense friendly over the last few years. Like, you can't touch the quarterback. It's harder to play defense as a defensive back. And you're seeing, you know, a lot of teams score points like crazy. 2019 LSU, last year's Bama team, right? Like, you know, these are all-time great offenses that we're seeing in the SEC now. So, you know, you're not going to stop a team like that. You can only kind of limit them, and then you have to match their production on offense. And, you know, 16 FPI reflects the question mark about whether we can produce enough offense, you know, to stay up there with the big boys. That's what I see about that ranking. I think it's a respect of what Auburn can be as a program, while acknowledging the reality of the situation that we face with our schedule, which really is every year.
Yeah, no, we're in this predicament every single year. We're going to have one of the toughest schedules in college football. It's not going to get any easier with our out of conference schedule the last couple of years. I mean, you look at Washington, Oregon, and we were scheduled to start last season against North Carolina, who ended up having a really good year. Due to COVID, we played an all SEC schedule, but North Carolina was supposed to be our opener last season. Then we're going to come in with our first big test on the road against Penn State in one of the most hostile environments in college football. Like it's not easy to play in. And to your point, Brian Harsin took a really tough job, right? Like if you're going to play at Auburn, you're going to have a very tough job. And if he can win at the same rate that he was winning at Boise here in Auburn, he might go down as one of the best ever, right? Like it's just not an easy thing to come in and do. But as far as the rankings are concerned, Penn State being at 10, that's a very optimistic ranking in my book, just because Penn State didn't have a great season last year, but that shows a respect for who they have going up there, that they have as far as running that program, that they feel like they can right the ship. Got a new offensive coordinator there at Penn State, so they're expecting to be able to put up more offense and cure some of the woes that they have going on there. But then it shows a ton of respect for us finishing the season in the fashion that we did last year, being fairly mediocre, but still considered to be one of the top 25 teams in the country. That's a good thing. And I think as an Auburn fan who has seen the trajectory of a school that has been counted out and then come from behind, I prefer for us to be even lower. Like just drop us down to like 28 or something, so that they can play the underdog role and be what traditionally has been the Auburn role of upset guy, and make people respect you later on. So I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about, and it keeps YouTube channels like mine going. But once they hit the field, it doesn't matter if you're 4 or 44 or 102. Right. They got to start popping pads and start running and hitting on the field. But Mississippi State at 8 and Oklahoma State at 9 and Texas Tech at 21 makes it look like I've got a video that I'm going to post here on the ESPN FPI. All right, we got Michael Gittens on the line and also Ike Jones talking Auburn football. Catch him on the War Rapport. So let me get the banner up here one more time. These guys, because this was a tremendous conversation. Again, it's Michael, it's Ike at the War Rapport. Please check out their YouTube channel. They're talking Auburn football all the time. Guys, I appreciate the time, appreciate the insight, the knowledge, the information. It was all great stuff.
Yeah, appreciate you having us on.
Thanks for having us on, Mark. War Eagle.